I'm Steve Lieberstein, co-chair of the working group on the Social Safety Net, Professional Staff Congress. I'll be moderating tonight. So I'd like to ask Debbie Bell, the union's executive director, to come, along with Joyce Mormon, who is the chair of the union chapter at Manhattan Community College, to come and give official readings from the union. And we can get started.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Debbie Bell. I'm the Executive Director of Professional Staff Congress CUNY. I'm here on behalf of President Barbara Bowen and the leadership of PSC, but we are part of a coalition that's sponsoring this event, and a coalition that has been working together, particularly across the city, to educate and motivate around defense of the social safety net. Our partners this evening, and I want to accurately name them for you, include Caring Across Generations, No Bad Grand Bargain, COMRO, the Committee of Municipal Retirees Organizations, the New York City Alliance for Retired Americans, which is linked to the AFL-CIO, and the New York City Managerial Employees Association.
And U.S. Labor Council?
And U.S. Labor Against the War, personified here on the panel. It's an exciting panel. You're going to hear a lot about the austerity politics that are threatening the social safety net, but more importantly, we're going to continue the conversation about what you must do to preserve the social safety net from the people who are here tonight. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the retirees chapter of our union. The retirees chapter has worked together over more than 2 years, first of all to produce the pamphlet about the social safety net, which I assume many of you have already seen, and if you haven't, they are available on the table over there and outside. They are a remarkable group, particularly the committee responsible for this, of retired union and social activists who have worked together to build a coalition, and what's becoming a large coalition across the state of New Yorkers to defend the social safety net. Their emphasis is the importance of coalitions. We know that from the labor movement. We know that from the advocacy organizations that we all belong to. It is important that we work together, and it's particularly important that we educate younger workers, even students, and we're glad to see some students here tonight, about the importance of the social safety net to all of us, because the safety net runs from ensuring access to public higher education, to preserving dignity for retired Americans, to ensuring that families have access to benefits if the prime money earner in their family is disabled or dies on the job. These are important issues that they are important benefits we must defend and issues that we must talk about, not just for those of us who are sort of moving gently into our 60s and 70s, but particularly to the younger generations, because if the benefits aren't disappear over the course of sequestration, etc., they won't be there when our children and the next generation are ready to take care of them, particularly those that relate to retirement benefits. So I'm going to turn this over to people much better able than I to give you the detailed information you need to move the fight forward. Thank you very much for being here.
I'd like to introduce now Lou Levitt from Rekindling Reform, who will welcome all of you on behalf of the No Bad Grand Bargain Coalition.
Great to be here. I want to invite all of you who are members of other organizations to consider becoming a member of the No Bad Grand Bargain Network. And we're very grateful for the initiative of the very good people who work so hard here at PSC to arrange this important meeting. at the end of the meeting, those are lines and work together. The specific issues that made this meeting necessary come from the mistaken premises of our president's budget, where he assumed that simply offering some concessions to the Republican Party would make it possible for the Republicans to come together and provide the funds necessary for our government. Already, Speaker Boehner has rejected those concessions, and Senator Graham has just said they're not enough. The AFL-CIO just the other day, in a beautiful statement by Richard Trumka, its president, said, "Tell President Obama, no change CPI, no cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or other Social Security benefits." And I would add, no cuts to other necessary social programs, and if you need them, find the money, find it, as Michael Zweig has said, in the military budget. We have a lot of problems affecting our country, in addition to the ones we're talking about here tonight. To address those problems effectively, those of us who consider ourselves progressive must work together, pool our knowledge and skills, share our ideas, educate the public, hold our political representatives accountable, build our power and our ability to shape public policy. The network will welcome your participation to help us accomplish these important ends. Congratulations on this meeting.
Thank you, Lou. We invite Mark Haney, who is the director of the Metro New York Healthcare for All campaign, to come and talk about the No Bad Grand Bargain Coalition.
I want to talk to you a little bit about No Bad Grand Bargain. You heard from Lou Levin, who was one of the founders of the coalition. It's almost over 4 dozen organizations, trade unions, community groups, civic organizations, and so forth, who've come together since last year's election to say no to a bad grand bargain in Congress around the ongoing federal budget fight. And that includes not only protecting the social safety net and programs, it includes cutting down on waste in the defense and national security sector. It also includes restoring fair taxes. It includes a focus on a politics of growth and rejecting a politics of austerity. Those are the 4 principles that we come together with under No Bad Grand Bargain, and the PSC has been one of our really strong partners in this coalition, and we want to thank the professional staff Congress and salute them for that. There's an action piece over on the side table. If I can ask somebody if they can hand some of these out, because I came in a little bit late and I'm not sure everybody got a copy, but I just want to run down quickly what the action steps are for this month that we're urging people to do. This Wednesday, the President puts out his budget proposal. We've heard news reports about what's in it, and we don't like some of what's in it. We like some of what's in it, and we don't like other things that are in it. One thing we don't like that's in it is what his proposal is to lower the cost of living adjustment formula for the Social Security program. So the first action we're asking people to take this month is on Wednesday, when the budget formally comes out, to make 4 phone calls to key policy people for us here in New York. One is call the White House comment line and tell them what you think. The second and third actually, is to call our 2 senators, Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand, and let them know what you think of the president's proposals. You might also want to tell them what you think of their own Senate budget resolution proposal that they enacted just before they went on recess before the Easter Passover holiday period. And then finally call your own member of Congress and tell them what you think about the president's proposals and about the proposal that the House adopted before it went on recess in late March. And it's a very simple message. It's no cuts to Social Security or social programs in any budget deal. Instead, focus on creating jobs. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't. Close corporate tax loopholes, negotiate drug prices in Medicare, and cut the defense spending. It's those four options instead of going after the social programs.
It's really nice to be up here among progressive labor types. You know, in DC, the grand bargain, you have a lot of people, including a lot of people who think of themselves as liberals, left of center, who think a grand bargain really makes a lot of sense. And, you know, one of the things that's become common in DC debates to say is, well, it's a question of, you know, are we going to, you know, support the elderly or support our children? And, you know, it really is kind of an incredible framing. I mean, there are people who are, you know, on the face of it, not particularly right-wing and, you know, for the most part, not particularly stupid. You know, it is kind of an incredible framing. And one of the things I remember, I said, wait a second, this is close to absurd. And I went and got a slide, actually someone else had put together, it was a few years old, and I got data from, you know, the other wealthy countries, the OECD countries. And what you find is that the countries that spend the most on the elderly, guess what? They also spend the most on their kids. So we put that up, we did a blog post on that, and then I had someone send me an email go, well, you know, that's from the late 90s. Okay. So we went and looked, and guess what? It's even stronger if you get the more recent data. You know, basically the story is that countries that care for their people, if you have governments that, you know, are caring for their people, whether they're old or young, they generally don't make a difference. And of course the logic, I mean, again, one of these things I find incredible, the logic of this pitting old against young is I'm always wondering what sort of families do these people grow up in? I mean, it is just very strange. I mean, I don't know a lot of people. I mean, I know people have problems with their parents or vice versa. They have problems with their kids. But, you know, the idea that, you know, the parents, the grandparents are going to be wealthy and the kids can't afford, you know, the basics, that just doesn't, that's not my experience growing up. It wasn't my friend's experience. That's just very strange. And we have data on this. It's a purely practical matter. A lot of times the grandparents are living with the kids. You know, so it's, you know, that's less common maybe for more upper income people, but in a lot of cases, low, moderate income people, it's a single household. You take away the grandparent's Social Security check, that affects the kid very directly. So the whole notion, you know, again, this is common in Washington, I don't know how far it's spread outside the country, but it's a pretty warped story, so hopefully we can change the nature of the debate. So what I want to do is, let's see what's coming up here.
So at this point, I'd like to thank Dean and introduce James Parrott, who is the Deputy Director and the Chief Economist at the Fiscal Policy Institute in New York, former Chief Economist for Economic Policy Office under Mayor David Dinkins, and longtime friend of the Professional Staff Congress, and also a panelist at the first PSC Social Safety Net Forum.
There's always tension when I talk about the economy between talking about how good it is versus how it's failing us. And I have to talk about how good it is because there are people who say, because of New York's taxes are so high, we have a pathetic economy, we have no job growth, and so on. Well, folks, if you look at the numbers on GDP or personal income growth in New York State and New York City in the last few years, we've done better than most places in the country. With our high taxes, and with the imposition of a millionaire's tax surcharge that's been in place since 2009. We're doing better than most places. So I have to tell that story to many reporters to get across the point that our tax burden is not quite as harmful as what some people would have us believe. But on the other hand, you know, I spend a lot of time talking about how the economy is failing us. It's true, we have better than average growth in the total economy and income, but we do a pretty pitiful job of sharing that growth. We've had growth that hasn't been matched by growth in median wages or the wages for the typical person, and we've seen poverty continue to rise. Let me say quickly a few words about what I see as a four-part budget agenda for New York City. I think we can use the city budget to address, we can't fix the income polarization problem, but we need to address it, and we should evaluate most city budget as well as other city policy decisions with an eye toward whether or not it moves us forward in terms of reducing income inequality or leaves us worse off. And reducing poverty is an important way to do that. We should use city resources more strategically to invest in human and physical capital and promote broadly shared prosperity. We should take the $3 billion in business tax credits, reevaluate whether or not those are producing anything valuable, and reallocate those resources to increasing wages at the low end of the labor market and supporting businesses that pay living wages. We should make our tax structure more progressive. Here's a chart that relates the share of income that various income groups receive with the share of taxes. So where the blue bar is higher, the dark blue bar is higher than the light blue bar, then that income group is paying more than its share of income in city personal income, residential property, and sales taxes. You'll notice the group on the far right, the top 1%, is underpaying their taxes. They have 25%. They have 33% of the income, this is in 2010, but are only paying 25% of the taxes. Bless you. Most of the tax change is implemented under Bloomberg, a member of the group on the far right, were regressive taxes, an increase in the property tax and the first increase in the sales tax rate since 1974. So we have about 300,000 union represented workers who work for New York City or the MTA or Health and Hospitals. Not one of them has a current contract, because the mayor, sort of pointing to the governor saying he froze wages, I expect the same thing here, is not going to agree to any increase. So that means that this mayor is leaving very recklessly a huge budget burden for the next administration to deal with. I think it can be addressed, but only in conjunction with unions. But the unions also, for their part, need to broaden their perspective. They need to have an approach to city policy that does something about the low-wage labor market, that does something about the people on poverty. We also need to have city officials who are willing to talk about how to make the tax system more progressive. I wouldn't lead with a progressive tax increase in order to settle the contracts, but I think you can do both of those if it's part of a broader set of policies that make New York City a fairer place and a more productive economy with better public services. Thank you.
I just want to start in the content of this discussion by addressing this claim that there is no money. We've heard this over and over again in the budget debates. There's just no money. Well, it's just a lie. There's lots of money. And what we have to do is to identify where that money is and go after it and move it into productive human needs. So one major source of where there's money, of course, is with rich people. The wealth and the incomes that are going to the top 1%, the top 2%, the people who are making $500,000 or more is just incredible, and we need to grab some of that and use it for social purposes, because they may think that they got rich on their own, but they got rich in a society which provides them all kinds of resources through the labor force and through infrastructure and every other kind of way, so that they have a social responsibility for the wealth that they have gotten, and we need to assert that and make that claim and go get that. The same thing is true for corporations, the same thing is true for the financial institutions, and there are many tax proposals, transactions taxes, and other things that we can discuss that address the question on the revenue side of the budget. But I want to focus our discussion here, my part of the discussion here tonight, not on the revenue side, but on the expenditure side of the budget, in particular, to look at the military budget. If you look at the overall federal budget, it's divided into two pieces. There's the so-called discretionary budget, which are items that have to be voted on every year by Congress to allocate and to appropriate and allocate the money. And then there are so-called entitlements, or things that the government just is spending on the basis of the terms of the policy, like Medicare or like interest on the debt and things like that. The military budget is part of the discretionary budget overall. I mean, there's some places where that isn't true, but largely the military budget is in the discretionary budget, which is the subject and the focus of the sequester that we're just experiencing now. Within that discretionary budget, the military takes up about 57%. Way more than half of all the discretionary spending goes to the military. The other 43% goes to the State Department, to the Labor Department, to Interior and the park systems, not just to social safety net programs, but to everything else that the government does. So what we are saying in U.S. Labor Against the War, and what the labor movement is trying to confront now in addressing this lie that there is no money, is to go after the military budget and to say we need to cut the military, we need to move that money away from the military spending, not just the wars, not just how many wars are there. This is U.S. Labor Against the War. It started out to be Iraq, and now there's Afghanistan, and now there's Yemen, and now there's Pakistan, and now there's, what is the war? But the war machine and the war apparatus is what we are confronting, and we're calling on a redirection of those resources. And I'm happy to say that in part because, in large measure, because of the work of U.S. Labor Against the War and the unions, central labor councils around the country that have pushed this question, in August of 2011, the National Executive Council of the AFL-CIO, which is the top body in the AFL-CIO, they issued a statement and a report on the jobs program. We need jobs. And in that report, they were very clear to point out that we cannot get labor's agenda done in this country unless we end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and unless we end the militarized foreign policy of the United States and totally redirect the way we do business and we operate in the world. That's the AFL-CIO National Executive Council, and we need to, within the labor movement, take that up and make that into a reality.
Listen, you've heard about a lot of bad things tonight. You've heard about the problems in the American economy, rising job insecurity, declining earnings, instabilities driven by financial speculation, as in the case of the housing bubble. You've heard about horrific problems of poverty in this, the richest city in the world, child poverty, senior poverty, the failure of our public systems to function properly. Well, all of these problems and more can be understood as rooted in public policies or rooted in the failure to enact and enforce public policies that would regulate financial speculation, that would establish minimum wages and maybe maximum earnings, but in many cases would tax away the excess earnings of the very rich. We once had those public policies after World War II. The marginal tax rate on the top incomes was, what, 91%? Thank you so much. 91%. Well, if public policies could, in principle, remedy these problems, then It's a problem of politics, isn't it? Because public policies are government decisions, patterned government decisions over time with regard to what to do about a certain sector or a certain problem or a certain dimension of our social living. These are public policies are shaped by government, and government is supposed to be shaped by politics. But there's a big problem in our politics. And the big problem in our politics has to do, in largest measure, with the flood, the soaking of our politics in money and propaganda. And it's getting worse. Well, maybe not worse than it's ever been. We forget how bad it's been at other times in our history. But it's getting worse than it was in living memory, and promises to get still worse as the Citizens United and sister court decisions work their way through the system. A certain proportion of that excess money that's earned at the very top makes its way into politics. And what does it do with politics? It fights for, pressures for, bribes for the policies that will lead to making more money that will go into politics. So, what can be done? Well, that question has arisen at earlier times in American history. And you know, there have been not solutions, but there have been reversals. The predatory domination of our policies, and through our policies, our society, the predatory domination of our society by the very rich, who of course just want to get richer. And when have those moments come? Well, they come when people have arisen in protest movements. They have not come as a result of the steady, regular, dutiful working for electoral politics, knock on doors for your cash. I'm not against that. You want to do that? Fine. But electoral politics, and sometimes we have to do that, but electoral politics by itself has never been sufficient to reverse the predatory accumulation of the wealth of our society by those who are already the wealthiest in our society. Protest movements have changed our society. Not as much as people wanted, or they dreamed, or they promised even, but they've had an impact.